If you vote, is it going to get counted? Is it going to matter?
If they can say, my vote's not going to count, I'll stay home, that can affect an election.
If the numbers supported what they're alleging, I'd be a cheerleader for them.
It happens, and it's a fact.
Where's the beef? Where's the evidence?
The problem we're trying to solve is to restore voter confidence.
As the facts and
There
the
you go
truth.
again.
Ma'am, the facts and the truth.
This is what's called my turn. Well, tonight we're tackling an issue that's at the heart of our democracy, election integrity. Now, ask yourself this question: is your vote safe? If you make a vote, is it going to get counted? Is it going to matter? Now, the topic continues to spark heated debate across the country. And psychologically, this is important because if you think it's not, it's awful easy to say, what's the point? Well, we've heard everything from claims of fraud to calls for reform, and with every election cycle, the conversation gets louder. But how much of that is fact versus fear? We're digging into the real concerns, the myths, and what all of this means for you and for our nation. Whether you're on the right, the left, or somewhere in between, the integrity of our elections affects all of us. This is a conversation America needs to have right here, right now. Michael Whatley is the chairman of the Republican National Committee and says the push for more protocols to protect your vote is warranted. While Mo Vallis says, and by the way, he held 2 senior White House roles with Democratic Presidents Clinton and Obama, including advisor to President Joe Biden, and he says our election integrity is no problem. It is totally intact. Take a look.
I began my exposure to electoral systems and processes as a poll worker at the age of 19, and I have watched it improve over time because of the greater access to the sacred right to vote.
Election integrity is one of the highest priorities of the RNC. What we want to make sure is that the people who are properly registered can vote, and that those who are not supposed to vote can't. You know, in this last election cycle, it really came down to a grand total of 44,000 votes over 3 different states that determined who was going to be the president of the United States.
The very low number of voter irregularity instances has never been proven to have changed the outcome of the last 2 presidential elections. Less than 0.0001% of all the votes cast in the last 8 years have had any remote issue of voter irregularity.
There is a wide swath of voters who believe that if there is cheating, their vote's not going to count.
I think too many people are conflating voter confusion and voter fraud. We have voter confusion. Felons not knowing in what states they can and cannot vote. Moving, not having maybe registered at the new address, but you still live in the same county.
Our entire priority when it comes to election integrity is making it easy to vote and hard to cheat.
I fear that we are so deeply divided as a nation that regardless of the outcome, the risk is social unrest.
Let me start out talking about me for a minute. My name's up all over the walls here. Let me tell you what I want. I want us to have a conversation that travels, because we have this here on Merit TV. It goes up on FAST channels. It goes up on my YouTube. It goes up on X. It goes everywhere. And I want this to be a conversation that travels and people go, wow, I really learned something from this. I've studied both of you guys really well. I think we can have a coherent conversation that really travels and makes a difference. Now, you say Republicans want to make it easy for people to vote. True?
Yes, absolutely.
You just want it to be hard to cheat.
Absolutely right.
And those two things are not mutually exclusive.
I don't think they are. And I don't think that the vast majority of the American people think that they are. You know, when we talk about basic protections on elections, such as only American citizens can vote in federal elections, that's the law. We need the states to be able to enforce that. We want voter ID in place. We want to make sure that the states are cleaning up their voter rolls. And in the vast majority of states where we have mail-in balloting, we want basic protections in place. And we want to make sure that we're there with observers whenever votes are cast or counted.
You don't disagree with wanting it to be easy to vote and hard to cheat.
Absolutely not. I don't know a Democrat, honestly, that doesn't want anybody who's legal and eligible to vote, to have the opportunity to vote. Frankly, Dr. Phil, in my opinion, it's the backbone and foundation of our democracy. Yeah. It's a sacred right. I think Mr. Whatley and I can agree on that, that the right to vote, we should make it easy. We should make it safe, right? We should make it to where nobody has any doubts about the integrity of their vote.
Right now, some studies say as many as 40% have some or more than some doubt about the integrity of the election process. And that's a problem. If the people perceive this as being flaky, we don't want it to be flaky, right?
Well, this is one case where perception is not reality, right? We want to create an environment where we need to tone down the rhetoric of fear and raising suspicion. I'm a fourth generation Texan. You know, we don't play around with BS here in Texas, right? And one of the things I'm here to just share with everybody is if there was an issue, if the numbers supported what they're alleging, I'd be a cheerleader for them. The numbers just are not there. They're just not there. You can slice it and dice it any way you want to, but the numbers do not support any symbol or rampant evidence of fraud.
But you raise a critical point, which is that there are people who worry about their vote, whether it's going to count, whether there's going to be cheating that's going to affect their vote. And if they can say, my vote's not going to count, I'll stay home, that can affect an election.
It certainly can. But you agree that can be a perception, not a reality.
Look, we have elections all across this country that are decided by dozens of votes, hundreds of votes, thousands of votes. Right? The last presidential election cycle was decided by 44,000 votes over 3 states. If you have 1% of voters stay home because they don't believe that their vote is going to count fairly, that's a real concern, and it's something that we think is important to address.
With all due respect, there wasn't 1%, Mr. Whatley. There just wasn't. In 2020, in the 6 battleground states, you had 0.0001% of any irregularities in the 6 battleground states.
You've had the opportunity to litigate that. There were 62 cases filed at the time. 61 of them, there was no finding sustained that there was any kind of material irregularity, let alone fraud. The one case had to do with ballots that were allowed after a postmark date. That was not material. And these were Democratic and Republican judges. Some were Donald Trump appointees. 6 swing states were contested. 2 Supreme Court cases, both lost by the Trump administration. 3 recounts, all reaffirmed Biden, 2 in Georgia and 1 in Wisconsin. 0 electoral votes were gained, and 6 elections have been claimed as being rigged. None of this has been borne out by objective triers of fact. So that should cause people to have a better perception that this is being monitored and everything seems to be okay. And it doesn't mean there aren't irregularities on both sides. Doesn't mean there aren't anecdotal examples of them sending out hundreds or even 1,000 ballots to people that are deceased or whatever, but those get caught later in the system because you don't have any evidence of irregularities that are material to the elections, either side of you, right?
Well, what I would say is we do have examples of irregularities that matter, maybe not in the presidential, but in other races down the ticket. We have seen examples of thousands of people who are not citizens of the United States voting in federal elections around the country. We think that that's a problem. What we want to do is, again, go back to having these basic safeguards in place. This is not election denialism. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's we think only American citizens should vote. We think that states should clean up their voter rolls. We should have a voter ID. You know, these are basic premises that the vast majority of Americans, Republican, Democrat, and Independent, all agree with. That's what we're trying to put in place to go forward and assure every voter that their vote is going to count.
I have good news, Dr. Phil, for Mr. Whatley and for all of your folks that support your stance. Since 1996, you will, I'm sure, acknowledge, it's illegal for a non-citizen to vote
Absolutely.
in this country.
Yeah.
You know, Shakespeare had a play called Much Ado About Nothing. You know,
You agree?
I just don't understand what all the drama is about.
But you agree that non-citizens shouldn't vote. You agree?
Absolutely, it's illegal. We should enforce that law, and we are, and the system is working pretty damn well.
Yeah.
So you
So
agree?
I don't know what all the hoopla is about.
Okay, so I'm just trying to see what we agree about.
I think we both love our country, don't we, Mr.
We
Locke?
do.
Yeah,
Okay, and we agree that non-citizens shouldn't vote.
absolutely.
Yes.
I hope we agree on that.
Okay. And how do you feel about voter ID?
I am okay with voter ID. I'm very centrist. I want it to be easy for people to vote legally.
Yeah.
Okay? As long as the ID is you have many options for a person, because I don't want a homeless person or a person down on their luck or downtrodden who may not have a driver's license or they can't find their birth certificate. I do want them to have the opportunity to demonstrate that they are a legal citizen of the United States and that they have the right to vote.
Listen, if I had to come up with my birth certificate to vote, I couldn't vote.
Yeah, I couldn't either.
My mother's deceased, and she probably had it in her pocket when we buried her. And I think we do all sorts of things to make it easier for people to vote. We can do the same thing in the ensuing 4 years for people to get an ID that they can use to work, to get paid, to get benefits, to vote, to do all sorts of things. I think we should get everybody an ID.
I don't have a problem with that, as long as it's done in a fair, respectful manner, treating every human being with dignity. That's all I care about.
Couldn't
Dignity,
agree more. All right,
respect.
coming up, 2 more guests who will share the stage, but certainly don't necessarily share a campaign ticket. We're going to meet them next. Hey everybody, Dr. Phil here. Could the US dollar be on the precipice of collapse? 19% of Americans 65 and older are still working. That's double from 35 years ago. Some people say that's something our elected leaders should be fixing. So what do? Well, I can tell you what I'm doing. I'm turning to physical gold and silver, and I encourage you to do the same thing right now. Preserve Gold is the only company I trust and recommend to my own friends and family, and you can trust them too. Today, they're giving away a free precious metals guide that contains essential information on how to help protect your accounts. Just text Dr. Phil to 50505. As an exclusive offer for my friends, in addition to their free guide, you can also get up to $15,000 in free gold and silver with a qualified purchase. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil, P-H-I-L, to 50505 to claim this exclusive offer from Preserve Gold today.
Until Taylor Swift's endorsement, I always have for 30 years claimed that they didn't matter. Celebrity endorsement. Taylor Swift is a phenomenon. When you see 405,000 people use the link that she provided to register to vote within 24 hours, that's what you call moving the dial. If Kid Rock moves you and inspires you, or Hulk Hogan and they inspire you to vote for Donald Trump, knock yourself out. No pun intended.
Hi, Dr. Phil. During the 2022 midterm Illinois elections, I was able to see my voting records, and I was shocked to see how my vote had been recorded.
What we see here is someone voted in your name for a midterm primary, and then we've got 1, 2, 3 presidential elections. You're saying you did not vote in.
I have never voted in a midterm. I have never voted in another presidential election. This is all a lie.
Since this happened, I decided that I must get involved. I am now a technical judge for every election, as well as being an appointed precinct committee member. This allows me to spread the word of how important it is that we get out and vote, so this cannot happen to myself or anyone else.
That was Tina, who found out someone voted in her name. Does that make you feel like maybe you need to check your voting history and see if you haven't voted, if somebody's been voting with your name? Raise your hand if that makes you think, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, okay. Now, my next guest, Harmeet Dillon, is an attorney and member of California's Republican National Committee. She says some methods of getting voters signed up are questionable. Meanwhile, Raj Goyal, a Democratic strategist from New York, says voter fraud is so rare there's no need to mandate voter IDs.
It is so critical that we have an open and fair election system where citizens feel confident in voting. Voter fraud is definitely an issue. I've personally worked on elections that were decided by fewer than 100 votes. So if that vote is infected by fraudulent votes, it changes the outcome of the election.
Widespread voter fraud is an absolute intentional lie. It is a political tactic that for the good of democracy, we should put a stake in its heart because it's just not true.
It's a fact. We should not gaslight people by saying that it isn't true.
So voter fraud is typically used as a Republican attack on reducing access to the ballot.
There are thousands of instances of people who are on the voter rolls who shouldn't be, whose ballots are nonetheless cast.
It is a felony to illegally vote in America, and that is a huge disincentive. There's not a damn bit of evidence that anyone wants to commit a felony and go to jail to throw an election for a politician.
You feel strongly about that?
Well, let's just do a little bit of common sense. This is a great show. Thank you for having me. So you've crossed a river, perhaps. You've risked life and limb. You want to build a better life. We have 2 immigrants on this stage right here. We know about coming over legally. And so you're going to do all of that because you need to make sure that the county clerk, some politician, you need to make sure that guy gets into office. It's just so laughable that somebody is going to risk imprisonment and exposure. And, you know, I have to just say this, it's kind of an elephant in the room. I'm going to have to go there. The reason why that there is a perception of voter fraud is because the other side continues to perpetuate, frankly, let's just call it what it is, a lie about the 2020 election. Mr. Watley said thousands, even said it just 5 minutes ago, thousands of illegals voting. Where's the beef? Where's the evidence? Donald Trump commissioned the Election Integrity Commission when he got elected. It was a joke. It didn't ever meet, it disbanded, and it's just a complete nothing burger. They were 64 cases, they went nowhere. It cost millions of dollars. People's lives were threatened. So this stuff is real. So the reason we've got any questions about the integrity of our vote, we do need one side to stop and let's work together to get more people to vote.
Both sides have talked about election irregularities and integrity over many, many election cycles. So this isn't a 2020 problem. This is an ongoing problem in our country. The Biden administration recently indicted somebody for voting in multiple states and doing that illegally. That is, of course, illegal. And so over the years, we do have many examples of this. One of the problems we've seen, I saw a study about this in Pennsylvania. There was a study of people who are not citizens voting. And there were hundreds of them. And by doing so, as Raj pointed out, they've actually jeopardized their citizenship. But the problem is we have a couple of federal statutes that encourage automatic voter registration. We've seen refugees coming from other countries being handed voter registration materials. They're not entitled to vote. They're not entitled to register to vote. They're going to get mailed a ballot if they register to vote. Then they're going to vote. And then they're going to be put in an awkward position. And the votes of the citizens in that jurisdiction will have been watered down. You can't go back and unvote those ballots. Our goal is to make sure that only citizens are voting, that it is free to get those IDs and make sure it's easy for people to vote. And more importantly, I think, that every citizen has confidence and accepts the outcome of the election. And that is a real problem. We've seen Democrats refuse to accept the outcome of elections. In fact, the Help America Vote Act was actually passed because of the Democrats not accepting the outcome of the 2000 election. And so, you know, this is a problem for both parties. And so these are problems that we need to constantly be vigilant about.
Ma'am, with all due respect, Dr. Phil, I was with Al Gore on the night he conceded that election. Yeah. You have not one example, at least in my lifetime, of any Democratic presidential candidate not graciously, respectfully, and with complete adoration for our democracy in a clean and proper transfer of power.
United States senators have refused to accept the outcome of our elections.
But ma'am, please don't mislead people. Don't mislead people.
My own Senator Dianne Feinstein refused to accept the outcome of an election. So it happens, and it's a fact, and some people are not willing to accept it.
Let's really dispense with this both sidesism. As Mo just said, I was in the room when Hillary Clinton conceded, and a lot of people on the left were saying, take it to Trump, dispute this. And she said, listen, fair and square, the 20,000 or so votes in these 3 states, I lost. And Donald Trump, of course, didn't do that. He didn't even participate in the inauguration in January 2021. And now I've got to say, you did a great job, Dr. Phil, but forget actually Dr. Phil, who we all respect here, and forget even those statistics. Here is a report called Lost Not Stolen. These are 8 of the most incredible conservative lawyers in the country. I disagree with them on almost everything. And they went through every single comma of the claims you're making. 300 footnotes in this article, and they said they couldn't find a darn thing that backs up your assertions about what happened in 2020. So the danger here is not, we all want fair elections. Kind of let's dispense with the theater here. Of course, non-citizens shouldn't vote. Enough of that. We know that. I've been involved in county election processes. I ran for state house. I won. I worked as a progressive Democrat, as a brown guy in Kansas, in a tough Republican area. I worked daily with the Republican county clerk, making sure our rolls were clean, making sure people voted by mail. That's the way it should work. We're all agreed on that. But let's be real about the fact that it is your side that has denied dangerously the outcome of the 2020 election. If there's doubt about this election, it's at your feet.
Do you think the 2020 election was stolen?
I think we're at a point when there's no point in discussing anything because A, no one listens, B, everything's used against you. Whatever you say, it's used to get clickbait. In 2020, if you look at what happened on social media with the censorship of the Hunter Biden story, that was not okay. As was explained to me, we have a division, I believe, of our own State Department who are in charge of going to other elections around the world to making sure they are democratically held elections. And we have rules that we look at to classify if their election was fair or not fair. A lot of those have to do with media censorship, fairness across the board, election access, so many different things. Most people would agree 2020 was not completely fair. And that's what matters. And I think people should look at it that way. Not about Trump or anything else, but look at it in that way.
If you say many states operate on the honor system, where people just check a box and there's no...
I'm subject to perjury.
I'm sorry, no state does that. No
All
state has the honor
states
system.
operate under the honor system under federal law. That's why we need the SAVE Act passed to require certain forms of ID, multiple choice, like you said. But right now, Democrats actually go to court. We have multiple cases going on right now regarding Arizona's attempts to require voter ID for federal election registration. And in fact, Democrats don't want there to be any requirement
How about this?
whatsoever.
I'll make
That's
a deal
fact.
right now. There are Democrats. I agree with you, Harmeet. I used to be a civil rights lawyer on this work, and they say, listen, we don't want any form of voter ID. I think you've eloquently heard from all sides. You said it very nicely. Maybe it is in a form of civic pride. I would say it's a constitutional right to vote, so we got to be a little careful there. But here's a grand bargain, if I could. Let's stop the voter suppression tactics. In Georgia, a law has just passed where you can be election vigilante, where I can go challenge these folks. These lovely people in the audience, I don't like the way they look. I'm not sure they're real voters. I'm going to put them on a list. Make sure you prove that you're a voter. That's not America. That's terrible, and it's a voter suppression tactic. I'll propose a deal right now. Let's have Democrats and Republicans get together and say, stop the suppression. We should win by addition, not subtraction. Whoever gets more votes. If Republicans win, great. If Democrats win, great. And let's stop.
Well, when you talk about voter
that.
suppression in Georgia, right? We had more people in Georgia register to vote than ever. We had more people vote in Georgia than ever with that law on the books. This is not about voter suppression. We want to make sure it's easy to vote and hard to cheat in every state
agrees with
across the
that.
country.
This is a nothing burger.
You want to bring up Arizona, why don't we tell the truth again? The only thing I've heard about voter fraud and voter interference is from your side. Mr. Meadows and those fake electors, remember them? That's from your side. So clean up your own family.
In the crucible of America is that we have a peaceful transfer of power. So forget even January 6th. Let's just focus on the fact that a president of the United States tried to get fake electors. Donald Trump got fired by the American people, by 81 million people, and just accept it.
He says it's a constitutional right to vote, so we have to be kind of careful there. It's a constitutional right for who to vote?
For citizens.
Right.
Yeah, but nobody disagrees on that.
But the whole point is, who is a citizen? They just want to identify somebody that is a citizen versus not. I mean, listen.
We agree.
There's a lot of technology out there. You don't hear very many stories of people going to an ATM and getting an extra $1,000.
That's right.
Great point.
We know who is getting the money. We know how much money they're getting. And you're broadening this beyond just who's voting at a given time in a given place and knowing that it's the right person that's voting. And you're talking about rhetoric that they're driving. There's a lot of rhetoric coming from your side of the ticket that's creating a lot of problems right now around this election. And
Such as, Dr. Phil?
well, referring to Donald Trump as Hitler and those sort of things are not good for the election.
I agree.
And if we're talking about manipulating the election, you're talking about it's your side that's doing this, it's your side that's doing this. It was your side that was going to Meta and controlling what information was flowing to these voters before they went to the polls and decided what they were going to vote. So it doesn't do any good to go finger pointing because it's a pox on both houses. I mean, don't get too high up on the high horse pointing at either side here because everybody needs to calm down. Both sides have not conducted themselves in a way that lifts America up in the eyes of the world.
I'm really concerned about election officials simply ignoring state law as to how elections are meant to be conducted. I think that is the bigger issue that affected the outcome of the 2020 election. In Georgia, election officials refusing to enforce laws that banned ballot harvesting. In Wisconsin, absentee voting being allowed by state officials when it's banned by state law other than for people who are medically incapable of voting in person.
It's very important to debunk any notion that there is systemic fraud and that there are forces that go around trying to throw elections. The most important thing we can do for election integrity is to remind the American people every day that the voting system is safe, that it's accurate, and that we need more people to vote, not less.
Dr. Phil, I think we can get back to what we came here to talk about.
I'd like
right?
that.
Because we need to get back to where we respect each other. And where we can look at each other and say, come on, you know, like we say at the dinner table down in South Texas, come on now, that's just not true, right? The problems are small. Let's be honest. The problems are small. Anybody that says they're non-existent is a liar.
Well, I agree with that. Look,
That's
I
not
think,
true.
you know,
but the problems are small, Mr. Watley.
What we just
so let's
saw,
not get all dramatic.
Sure.
Let's stay calm and let's say, you know what? Let's enforce the laws we have in place.
Yep.
The good news is that fundamentally our system works. There are 4-step checks and balances process in our electoral system. If it was broken, I tell you from the bottom of my heart, if it was broken, I would admit it.
100%.
I would sit right here with Dr. Phil, because he's analyzing the 4 of us right now, by the way.
You have no idea.
Yes.
You have no idea.
I'm not going to agree that the problems are small. Just this month, we had the former presidential candidate, Hillary Clinton, say that people should be put in prison and sued if they say misinformation about an election. And I guess she's going to decide what the misinformation is. Under the First Amendment, and I'm a First Amendment lawyer and a civil rights lawyer, we absolutely have the right to question what happens in an election. We have a duty to question it, I think. We have a duty to ask questions. And nobody should be put in jail in America for their speech
Let's focus on Ken Block, who was appointed by Donald Trump as a voting expert, brought in to do an evaluation, analysis, and assessment of the 2020 election. Did you read the outcome of his report?
I wasn't involved.
Did you read the outcome of his report?
Why don't you tell us what it said?
It said all of these allegations are debunked, that there is no evidence of rampant voter fraud or voter irregularity in the 2020.
Well, see, that's the
this
difference.
is Donald Trump's
That's the
voting
difference.
expert. Ma'am,
See, that's the
this is
qualification
your
of
voting
rampant.
expert.
Every single violation of the law,
course.
and there are many documented, decreases the integrity of an election. It decreases the motivation of voters to get out there and vote. I, as a lawyer, and I, as a volunteer who knock on doors, who's run for office myself, I hear it. I've heard it from thousands of Americans. They're concerned about it. It's our duty as lawyers to increase that confidence, not decrease that confidence.
Tell them the facts so that they're not scared.
we talk about that these irregularities or these concerns that we have are trivial. They're not.
They're de minimis.
Right. I was a member of the Florida recount legal team for George W. Bush down there.
Congratulations.
Right. And so we saw that entire election come down to 534 votes.
That's right.
It
537.
matters.
And the system worked, Mr. Watley.
We also saw in North Carolina, when I was the state party chair back in 2020, that the Chief Justice race there was decided after 2 recounts and 82 different challenges by the Democrat
The system
candidate.
worked, in other words.
400.
Why are we trying to fix something that's not broken,
We're not.
guys?
What we want to do is make
searching
sure
for a war.
in every single election that we have basic premises in place.
They're there.
That's great.
So they're there. The laws are in place.
Yep.
They need to be enforced properly.
Yep.
All of us agree on that.
But yet they're not. See, I'll give you another example. Every time we try to purge the voter rolls in a state as provided by state and federal law, Democrats go to court and say, no, you can't do that.
We should
And so
clean
that's
up
a
the voter
problem.
rolls. That's
Look,
a good
when
thing.
you're having vote by mail, which is now the system in most states after COVID.
No, Oregon's been doing vote by mail
no,
for
ma'am, that's
decades.
not accurate. That's not true.
I live in
again.
California with 40 million
Ma'am,
people, and
in
it's
Oregon,
absolutely
you could
new.
vote mail-in ballot in the
Automatic
2020 election.
vote by mail is a new COVID phenomenon.
And you know what? It's
And
fantastic because it allows people to vote.
Because we have that, it's so much more important that we don't have a million extra people on the rolls in Los Angeles.
We agree. Nobody wants a million
Listen,
extra
We need to
people.
clean the voter rolls.
There's a big difference between trying to win an argument and trying to solve a problem. The problem we're trying to solve is to restore voter confidence
That's right.
in our election process.
I agree with that.
So let's tell them the truth. Because the facts and
There
the
you
truth.
go again.
Ma'am, the facts and the truth are...
This is what's called my turn.
Okay, Dr.
I've been sitting here real quietly listening to you guys argue, and I want to try to solve the problem. I started out by saying that no one has proven that there has been a material irregularity in an election. There hasn't been proof by objective triers of fact that there has been an irregularity or a fraud or a mistake that determined the outcome of an election such that it needed to be reversed. That hasn't occurred on either side. It just hasn't occurred. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be vigilant and diligent and that we shouldn't put in place safeguards, guardrails to make sure that it's easy. Voting is a right and that we should do everything we can to pave the road for people to vote, whether they're disabled or elderly or low socioeconomic or whatever. We should make it easy for people to vote and we should have safeguards in that people don't even vote accidentally if they're not entitled to vote. We should make sure that we know who's voting. I think we should always, as technology grows, it should be easier and easier for us to safeguard that. And both sides should want that unless they think they have some extra advantage through ambiguity and confusion. If they think clarity and accuracy is the best solution, then they should both want that. And I think both sides should want that. The problem that I think needs to be solved is that 40% of our population that have some degree of doubt in the integrity of our election process. And you can say it's their fault. It doesn't matter. They do. And those of us that have platforms to speak from, those of us who have leadership positions on both sides of the ticket should be good stewards of those positions and do everything we can to restore people's confidence in the integrity of that process. And if that means having voter IDs, if it means having lots of monitors and proctors for elections, whatever it is, so people say, hey, they're paying attention down there. So I'm confident that when I make a vote, it's going to be counted. I mean, everybody in this audience should come away from this conversation saying, hey, these are responsible people who aren't just going to bicker back and forth, and they're in leadership positions, and I feel good about them being stewards of our election process. They have different views, but they all want the right person to win the election, and that's whoever gets the most votes. It's just that simple. Whatever happened in 2020 happened in 2020. There's a reason the rearview mirror is this big and the windshield is this big. That was then. It's what's ahead that matters. And we need to go into this election and we need to do it with integrity and pay attention. If your side wants 165,000 monitors, When the counting begins, have 265. If that's what it takes to feel good about it, do it. But when the count comes in, the count comes in.
It is what it is.
It is what it is, and then let's all decide whoever wins, that's everybody's president, and get behind them and do it.
Yep.
And on 9/12/2001, we all remember 9/11, but on 9/12, we were all Americans.
We were united. That's exactly
We were all Americans. I pray to God 9/11 doesn't have to happen again for us to all be Americans. Let's just decide that we can do that. I want to open this up to questions from the audience while I've got this level of expert here. Right here, we'll bring you a mic. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, Dr. Phil. My name is Gail. My polling place changed. I've been in Georgia 32 years. It never changed before. Because I checked my mail, I saw that my polling place changed. But suppose I didn't check my mail and I went to go vote, standing in that long line. And then I get there and I can't vote. I have to go to a different polling place. That's gonna be a problem because it just happened in Georgia.
Yeah, and that would be really upsetting, I know. But you're right, we need to make sure people know it. Say your name and go.
Yes, sir. Hey, Dr. Phil, my name is Chase. I just moved to the beautiful state of Texas about a year ago. Thank you. I've yet to vote in person ever in my life. I'm from beautiful Seattle, Washington, where we've had mail-in votes my entire adult life. So regarding the issue that lady brought up in that video is, somebody voted in her place. I probably should know this, but how would somebody, I don't know if anybody knows, how would somebody verify their voting history in any, because you guys mentioned Oregon as well, any mail-in voting state, and that's an issue we may have going forward, especially because you mentioned post-COVID, that's becoming the norm is mail-in votes. How would you verify your voting history when it comes to mail-in votes? Because we don't have in-person polling in Washington State.
Yeah, so in every state you have the registrar or the office that runs the election, and you can go check with them, and they'll be able to pull it. So in Texas, that's your county elections office, and go in there, and they would be able to pull that up for you.
Fully agree. In fact, when I knocked my 15,000 doors, I think people were shocked. We actually know, we don't know who you voted for, but we know whether you voted. So the data's all there, and you suggest, Dr. Phil, you can go check and just put it into the website and find it.
Those of us who are involved in politics, we get lists of that, and the more you vote, the more you're going to hear from us.
So watch out.
Jamie, you had a comment, right?
Mail-in ballots in particular. How do we know if they're going to be delayed and get counted on election day?
So you can register under ballot tracks, which is available in many jurisdictions, to get a text message that your ballot was received, that it was opened and counted. But the problem is, and this is a bipartisan.
You can also go to the website and check.
This is a bipartisan problem. I'll give you an example. There was a recent primary in a red state, and the ballots went from that state to Las Vegas to be processed, and they didn't get back in time. They didn't get counted in time because the inefficiency of our postal system sent the ballots out of that state. So many voters' votes were not counted because of that. In America in 2024, that's a disgrace. That really needs to be improved.
We need to fix those problems, right?
All right, yes, ma'am, in the back.
My daughter moved out of California 15 years ago. She still gets a ballot. I tried for years and years to get her off, and she's not.
It's terrible.
I have lived in Texas now 2.5 years. I still get a ballot in California. I mean, I've gone to the registrar, I've called, I've gone to voting. Why are we still getting ballots?
Well, I'm a California resident, and so that's my confession here. And it does vary by county. So Los Angeles County, dirtiest voter rolls in America, I would argue. And so I have friends who got ballots the same as you're describing. That's a shame. That's a failure by public officials to enforce the law, and we need to hold them accountable,
more than
vote them out,
years,
and do a better job than we've done.
She still gets one.
This is exciting. Another thing we can agree on.
that.
Purge the rolls.
That's right.
Purge the rolls.
Yeah,
That should not happen.
Oh, yeah, they don't purge them at all. There was over 1 million in 2017 lawsuit in Los Angeles County alone.
All right, we are out of time, so I do have to go. Listen, I really do want to thank the four of you for having an intelligent conversation here and a good exchange between the four of you. We need more of this kind of discourse, and I respect the four of y'all for having this kind of thing. So thanks to Michael Watley, Movella, Harmeet Dillon, and Raj Goyal. Thank you guys so much. And another big thanks to you for watching. Don't forget to get out and vote on Tuesday, November 5th. Your vote does count. And I always say, it's not just get out and vote. Get out and make an informed vote. That's really important. And that means don't get all of your information from one channel or one place on the internet. Actually move around a little bit. Check and see if everybody's telling the same story. Critical thinking is not used enough these days, so think for yourself. And make sure you do that with your young kids that are just getting to voting age. I get so tired of turning on the television and people telling everybody what to think instead of how to think. That needs to be more popular than what it is. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.